The chamber fell silent, but not with respect, with the kind of silence that follows a gunshot. Cameras clicked like distant thunder, capturing every flicker of tension. And then it happened. Liz Cheney leaned forward, her voice sharpened with anger, her words designed to slice. She did not debate, she lashed out, dismissing Jasmine Crockett with the kind of condescension that echoes through history. Her tone carried arrogance, the smugness of someone convinced that power alone makes them untouchable. "Belong here," she sneered, not in words alone, but in the sharpness of her glare. For a moment, it felt like the weight of the chamber itself tilted against Jasmine. Spectators shifted, journalists scribbled, and even allies worried. Could this young Congresswoman withstand the storm of venom hurled her way? The insult was not just personal, it was political, cultural, generational. Cheney's outburst was designed to humiliate, to strip dignity in public. But then, the unexpected. Jasmine Crockett did not rise in anger, nor did she falter. Instead, a calm smile broke across her face, soft, deliberate, disarming. It was the kind of smile that says, "I've seen worse storms than this, and I'm still standing." That single expression shifted the energy of the room. Silence turned heavy, almost electric, as if everyone could feel that the narrative had just flipped. Viewers watching live leaned closer to their screens. Commentators paused mid-sentence. That calm smile didn't just resist Cheney's attack. It mocked it, revealed it, exposed it. For the first time, Cheney looked unsettled, as though her power had slipped not by force, but by poise. And in that moment, the story ceased to be about Cheney's rage. It became about Crockett's composure, her refusal to be diminished. Villain had swung with fury, the hero answered with stillness, but this was only the opening blow. No one in that chamber, not the reporters, not the lawmakers, not even Liz Cheney herself, could have predicted what would come next. Because that calm smile was not the end of the confrontation. It was only the beginning, and what unfolded after would shake the entire country. The chamber's silence lingered long after Jasmine Crockett's calm smile. Yet beneath that stillness, the stakes began to rise like a storm cloud stretching across the horizon. Because this clash wasn't just about two women on opposite sides of an argument. It was about what each of them represented. Liz Cheney, carrying the weight of a dynasty, spoke with the entitlement of someone born into politics, someone who believed authority was her inheritance. Her words carried not just disdain for Crockett, but a deeper contempt for the millions of Americans who looked at Jasmine and saw themselves. Immigrants, working families, women of color, young leaders. They all understood what was at risk. If Cheney could belittle Crockett here, in the full glare of cameras, what message did that send to every ordinary citizen who dared to rise against the establishment? This wasn't just a skirmish. It was symbolic combat staged under marble, pillars, and national spotlights. The confrontation became a mirror, reflecting two visions of America, one clinging to old hierarchies, the other daring to redefine them. The audience didn't need pundits to explain it. They felt it in their bones. And yet, the danger for Crockett was real. A single misstep, one flash of anger, one slip of words, and Cheney's allies would pounce. Headlines could easily twist the story. Young Congresswoman loses temper. Every camera was a loaded weapon. Every pause in her breath, every flicker in her expression, had the potential to be magnified, replayed, distorted. But Crockett understood the terrain. She knew this wasn't just about winning a debate. It was about surviving an ambush, with dignity intact. Her calm smile wasn't passive, it was strategy. It was a shield forged from years of being underestimated, dismissed, and told to wait her turn. And by refusing to rise to Cheney's bait, she forced the audience to question, why is Liz Cheney so rattled by a smile? Outside the chamber, the stakes expanded even further. Millions of viewers tuned in not just for entertainment, but for affirmation. They wanted to know, does dignity still matter in American politics? Can calm strength silence arrogance? Social media began to stir. Tweets lit up timelines. Did you see that smile? Iconic. Jasmine Crockett didn't even need words. The moment was already leaving digital fingerprints on history. And yet, as powerful as that smile was, no one knew what was coming next. Because Cheney wasn't finished. Rage rarely retreats quietly. Wounded ego lashes out harder, and Crockett, It was about to be tested in ways that would demand more than composure. For the viewers, it was no longer just curiosity, it was suspense. They leaned forward not only to watch Crockett defend herself, but to see whether America's future could be defended in the process. And what happened in the next round of exchanges would transform this skirmish into a defining showdown. To understand the venom in Liz Cheney's words, you have to step back. You have to see the roots of her arrogance, the soil that fed her conviction that she could tower over others with nothing more than a sneer, because Liz Cheney didn't just walk into Congress. She was born into it, into the smoke-filled rooms of Wyoming power, into the Cheney dynasty that carved its name into America's war rooms and oil fields. Her father, Dick Cheney, once called the most powerful vice president in American history, cast a shadow so long it swallowed entire generations. Wars in the Middle East, Halliburton contracts, the iron fist of secrecy. This was the inheritance Liz grew up under. Power was not earned in her world, it was assumed. And when power becomes assumption, arrogance follows like a loyal dog. Liz learned early that anger could be a weapon. In debates, she didn't search for truth, she searched for dominance. Her speeches, sharp as bayonets, were crafted not to inspire, but to intimidate. And those who opposed her quickly learned that her strength came not from persuasion, but from lineage. She was a Cheney. That name alone was a hammer used to silence, not to build. Yet beneath the armor of confidence was a crack, insecurity. For all her privilege, Liz Cheney was haunted by a truth she could never outrun, that she had inherited a legacy of controversy, of war, of decisions that many believed stained America's conscience. Critics whispered that her career was not built on service, but on inheritance, that her power was borrowed, not earned. And every time she stepped into the public arena, those whispers grew louder. Perhaps that's why her rage against Jasmine Crockett burned so hot. Jasmine represented everything Cheney's story lacked: grit, struggle, the climb from the ground up. Where Cheney inherited influence, Crockett earned respect. Where Cheney wielded her father's name, Crockett carved out her own. And nothing threatens entitlement more than authenticity. So when Crockett smiled in that chamber, when she dared to remain calm in the face of Cheney's storm, it wasn't just resistance, it was exposure. It revealed Cheney's fury for what it was: fragility dressed as power. But Liz Cheney wasn't the type to retreat. History had taught her to double down, to escalate, to fight even when the moral ground beneath her feet crumbled. In her mind, this wasn't just a debate, it was a battle for control, for dominance, for preserving the old order. And in that battle, she was willing to scorch the earth. Yet as the cameras rolled, a different story was writing itself. The very things Cheney believed made her untouchable, her name, her tone, her fury, were beginning to look like weaknesses. No longer admired dynasty the way they once did. They admired dignity, they admired resilience. And Jasmine Crockett, with nothing but a calm smile, was embodying both. It was in this contrast that Cheney's downfall began, not with a single line, not with a single gaffe, but with the slow unraveling of her image, a powerful woman undone. Not by someone stronger, but by someone calmer. Still, the villain rarely sees her own unraveling. Cheney, convinced of her superiority, leaned harder into aggression. She prepared to throw every barb, every insult, every ounce of generational entitlement at Crockett. Because for Cheney, this wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about crushing a symbol before it could rise. What she didn't realize was that every attack she launched would only set the stage for Crockett's most powerful counter, and the woman she sought to humiliate was about to show the world exactly why she was ready for this fight. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's calm smile carried such weight, you have to know where it came from, because that smile wasn't born in luxury. It wasn't the product of dynasty or privilege. It was carved from struggle, from grit, from battles fought long before she ever set foot in Congress. Jasmine Crockett's story began far from the marble floors of Washington. She grew up in neighborhoods where opportunity was scarce and obstacles were everywhere. While some children were handed platforms, Crockett was handed warnings, told that success wasn't meant for people like her, told to lower her voice, to shrink her ambitions. But she refused. She learned early that if doors didn't open, you didn't wait politely. You pushed. You fought. You carved your own path. Her education wasn't smooth. Every step was uphill, every win hard-earned. In classrooms where doubt hovered, Crockett answered with determination. Teachers who underestimated her soon discovered a student who would not back down, who studied not just to pass, but to excel. She didn't chase perfection for recognition. She chased it because she understood what was at stake, a future not just for herself, but for her family, her community. And everyone who needed someone to break the mold, law school became her battleground. While others coasted on connections, Crockett hustled, pouring hours into her craft, sharpening her understanding of justice. She wasn't there to wear the title of lawyer. She was there to wield it. To use the law as a shield for the vulnerable and a sword against the powerful who trampled them. When she entered public service, it wasn't for vanity. It was for survival, for the single mothers fighting eviction, the workers cheated by corporations, for communities dismissed, silenced, overlooked. She became their voice when they had none. She carried their pain into courtrooms, their struggles into legislative halls. And slowly, respect began to follow. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. This is what made her dangerous to someone like Liz Cheney. Crockett's authority didn't come stamped with a family crest. It came from lived experience. It came from sacrifice. Insult thrown at her was an insult thrown at the millions she represented and she carried them on her shoulders with quiet pride. But dignity didn't mean weakness. Her calmness was not surrender, it was discipline. Crockett had faced storms far worse than Cheney's temper. She had argued in courts where judges tried to silence her, debated in halls where colleagues questioned her worth, faced headlines, crafted to distort her truth. Each time, she refused to break. Each time, she stood taller. Each time, her resolve grew sharper. So when Liz Cheney hurled her fury in that chamber, Crockett did not see a titan. She saw another obstacle, another attempt to drag her back into silence. She smiled, because she knew silence was no longer an option. Her composure was not just personal armor, it was a message to every child who grew up hearing they weren't good enough, it said. You belong here. You are strong enough. You will not be broken by their anger. That's why her smile cut deeper than any shout could. It wasn't just directed at Cheney. It was directed at America. And this is what turned her into more than just a participant in the confrontation. It turned her into a symbol, a reminder, that the American story isn't written by dynasties alone. It's written by those who refuse to bow. It's those who rise from the margins and claim their place at the table. But heroes don't emerge without trials. And Jasmine Crockett was about to face one of her hardest yet. Because Cheney, rattled and exposed, wasn't going to back down. She was going to escalate. She was going to double her fury. And when she did, Crockett's calm strength would be tested like never before. The chamber was no longer still. It pulsed with unease, as if everyone inside knew the confrontation was about to break wide open. Liz Cheney leaned in, her voice sharper now, louder, trying to drown out the calm that unsettled her. She jabbed the air with her finger, her words laced with the venom of someone desperate to regain control. You don't understand the seriousness of this work, she snapped, her tone dripping with superiority. You come in here smiling? As if this is a game? But this is Congress, not a playground. Gasps rippled across the room. It wasn't just an attack on Crockett's presence. It was an attack on her very right to be there. Cheney's strategy was clear. Paint Jasmine as inexperienced, as unworthy, a child playing in the arena of giants. But Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply adjusted her microphone and let the weight of silence linger before speaking. That pause was a dagger. Every second Cheney waited for a reaction felt like an eternity. Then softly but firmly, Crockett replied, With all due respect, Congresswoman, dignity isn't a game. It's a responsibility, and I take it very seriously. The contrast was searing. Cheney's fury against Crockett's composure. The villain rattled, the hero steady. Cameras zoomed in on Cheney's face, capturing the faint crack in her armor. She had expected fire, a shouting match she could dominate. Instead, she was met with ice, calm, unshakable resolve. But Cheney wasn't ready to concede. She raised her voice, practically shouting now. Don't lecture me on responsibility. I've been fighting for this country since before you even. Thought about running for office? Her words echoed, but they didn't land as intended. Out. Instead of authority, they carried entitlement. Instead of strength, they reeked of desperation. In that moment, she sounded less like a leader and more like someone clinging to a past that was slipping away. Crockett tilted her head, a calm smile returning like a quiet storm. And yet, she said gently, America is still waiting for leaders who fight for all of us, not just for themselves. The chamber erupted, not in chaos, but in tension so thick you could feel it in your chest. Allies suppressed grins. Spectators leaned forward. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cheney's jaw tightened, her grip on the table firm, but her control was slipping. This was no longer just debate, it was theater, and the audience could see who was in command. Each barb Cheney launched came back to her like an echo, weaker than before. Each word from Crockett landed with more gravity, not because it was louder, because it was truer. The escalation had reached its peak. The villain had spent her rage, and the hero stood untouched, stronger than before. Realized not the chamber, not the millions watching at home, was that Jasmine Crockett was just getting started, because her mic drop moment. The counterattack that would leave Cheney speechless was still to come. The air in the chamber felt heavy, as though every breath carried the weight of history. Liz Cheney had thrown everything at Jasmine Crockett, condescension, fury, dismissive smirks, but none of it landed. The cameras caught it all. Cheney, red-faced, her voice cracking with anger, while Crockett sat poised, waiting, her calm smile unbroken. And then the moment came. Crockett leaned forward, adjusted her microphone with the composure of someone about to rewrite the script. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone was steady, measured. But each word carried the punch of truth sharpened by years of struggle. Congresswoman Cheney, she began, her voice smooth as glass. You've spoken about responsibility, about fighting for this country. But let's be honest, responsibility isn't measured by how loudly you yell in this chamber. It's measured by whether the people outside these walls feel seen, heard, and protected. And if they don't, then we've failed. The chamber stilled. Cheney blinked, her expression flickering. For the first time, she looked unsure. Crockett didn't stop. She let the silence stretch just enough, then pressed forward. You come from a dynasty. You inherited power. But millions of Americans don't inherit anything except debt and hardship. I didn't come from privilege. I came from the communities who've been left behind by leaders too busy protecting their own legacies. So yes, I smile not because I take this work lightly, but because I know I carry them with me. And no insult you throw will ever strip that dignity away. A murmur ran through the chamber. Reporters froze mid-scribble, realizing the gravity of what they were hearing. On social media, clips of her words began to circulate instantly, the hashtags forming in real time. Hashtag.com strength, hashtag smile V's shout, hash Crockett rising. Cheney tried to interject, but Crockett raised a hand gently, almost dismissively. The gesture wasn't aggressive, but it was final. For the first time, Cheney, the daughter of one of America's most ruthless power brokers, was being told to wait her turn. And she did, Crockett continued, her voice tightening with conviction. You tell me I don't understand seriousness? Let me tell you what's serious. Serious is watching families evicted from their homes while billion-dollar corporations get tax breaks. Serious is children sitting in classrooms without enough books while defense budgets balloon. Serious is the voices of ordinary Americans being drowned out by the same dynasties that claim to fight for them. That's serious. That's the fight I came here for. Applause threatened to erupt from the back of the chamber, quickly hushed by the gavel. But the energy was unstoppable. Even those who disagreed with her politically could feel it. This wasn't just a speech. It was a dismantling. Cheney's face flushed deeper. She opened her mouth, searching for a retort, but the room wasn't with her anymore. Every angry twitch only magnified the contrast, her rage against Crockett's poise, her dynasty against Crockett's authenticity. Crockett leaned in further, delivering the line that would echo long after the chamber emptied. Power that is inherited crumbles when tested. Power that is earned, it endures. And Congresswoman Cheney, tonight the American people are seeing the difference. It was the mic drop, the thunderclap, The words hung in the air like a verdict. Social media exploded. Tweets turned into trends, trends into headlines. Crockett destroys Cheney with one line. Memes sprouted instantly. Cheney red-faced beside Crockett's calm smile, captioned with her words, "Ack!" On TikTok, teenagers who had never watched a congressional hearing in their lives lip-synced the line like an anthem. But inside the chamber, the silence was even louder. Cheney sat frozen, gripping her notes, but her confidence had drained. The dynasty's aura was gone, stripped away not with shouting, but with dignity. Crockett, sensing the shift, didn't gloat. She didn't raise her chin in triumph. She simply leaned back, folded her hands, and smiled again, calm, deliberate. Devastating, because that was the brilliance of her counterattack. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. She didn't fight Cheney on her terms, her on higher ground, where arrogance cannot reach. And in doing so, she didn't just win an argument. She claimed the moment. Commentators would later call it the smile heard across America. Historians might mark it as the night dignity stood taller than dynasty. But in that instant, in that chamber, it was something simpler. A reminder that truth, when delivered with composure, can be louder than 1,000 shouts. Cheney lowered her gaze, defeated not by force, but by grace. Crockett had not only survived the storm, she had turned it back on its source. And outside those walls, the shockwaves had already begun, because what happened next would spill far beyond the chamber. Into the streets, into the feeds, into the soul of a country hungry for symbols of resilience. The chamber grew strangely quiet, almost as if the walls themselves wanted to hear what would happen next. Liz Cheney had exhausted her voice. Her sharp words now sounded like echoes bouncing off stone. Her face was red with frustration. Her tone shaky, as though even she knew her attacks were starting to sound hollow. She had thrown everything she could at Jasmine Crockett. Accusations, interruptions, attempts to belittle her. But there stood Jasmine, motionless, composed, a faint smile resting on her face. That smile wasn't arrogance. It wasn't mockery. It was something deeper, a kind of calm strength that said, "You cannot shake me." Her silence was not weakness. It was power in its purest form. Everyone in the room felt it. The audience leaned in, not to hear Cheney's voice anymore, but to witness Crockett's stillness. In that moment, Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to interrupt or match. She let Cheney's fire burn itself out, and when Cheney finally paused, breathing heavily, searching for her next line of attack, Crockett simply tilted her head, smiled a little wider, and then began speaking in the calmest voice imaginable. Her words didn't rush. They didn't bite. They glided through the air with clarity and conviction. She dismantled Cheney's arguments one by one, not by shouting, but by presenting undeniable facts, layered with grace. Each line she spoke felt like a mirror reflecting Cheney's weakness back at her. The audience could see it, the shift in power. A few moments ago, Cheney seemed like the dominant voice in the room. Now she looked like someone desperately trying. To claw back control, she had already lost. In Crockett, she had become the center of gravity, calm, steady, unshakable. The turning point wasn't a clever retort or a loud outburst. It was Crockett's silence, her patience, her smile that told everyone, "I don't need to fight your way. Strength is greater when I remain myself." That was the moment Cheney's arguments collapsed, not with a bang, but with a quiet, unshakable truth. The room falls into an uneasy silence. By this point, Liz Cheney's voice has grown hoarse from the sheer force of her arguments. She leans back in her chair, adjusting her notes, trying to convince herself that she has won the battle. But the cameras tell a different story. The nation isn't seeing a confident leader holding her ground. They're seeing a rattled politician fighting desperately to keep control. And then Jasmine Crockett does something extraordinary. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't counter with an equally aggressive speech. Instead, she slowly leans forward, her calm smile still present, and simply says, "Are you done?" The simplicity of those 3 words lands like a thunderclap. No shouting, no elaborate rebuttal. It's a quiet confidence that cuts deeper than any insult. The audience shifts in their seats, reporters scribble furiously, and suddenly the dynamic changes completely. Liz tries to respond, but her tone falters. The more she speaks, the more obvious it becomes. Crockett isn't shaken. She isn't angry. She isn't even trying to win in the traditional sense. Her composure itself is the victory. Viewers watching the broadcast feel the same thing. This woman cannot be rattled. Crockett then begins to dismantle Cheney's points, not with long monologues, but with sharp, precise statements, each one delivered softly like surgical strikes. And each time she pauses, letting the silence amplify her words. That smile never fades, and it's infuriating to her opponent. Because what Crockett has mastered is not just debating, it's control of the room. By the time she's finished, it's not Cheney who looks powerful. It's Crockett, sitting there with her calm presence, while the world watches the once commanding. Liz Cheney reduced to awkward sighs and forced retorts. The audience doesn't remember the specifics of Cheney's shouting. They remember the moment Jasmine Crockett turned a political brawl into a lesson in composure, and one without ever raising her voice. The air in the chamber was heavy, almost suffocating, as Liz Cheney doubled down. Her voice grew sharper, her tone more desperate, as though sheer aggression could bend reality in her favor. She jabbed her finger toward Jasmine Crockett, her words echoing with force, a final attempt to overpower through noise. For a split second, some in the audience leaned forward, expecting Jasmine to finally snap back, to return fire with fire. But instead, Jasmine just smiled. Not the forced smile of someone trying to mask anger, not the nervous grin of someone on the defensive. This was calm, steady, and utterly disarming. A smile that said, "You don't control this narrative." Do. The room shifted. What moments ago had felt like a battlefield suddenly felt like a courtroom where one side had just lost credibility. As Barsman didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to cut across. Her silence, paired with that subtle, calm smile, became louder than Cheney's words. People in the gallery began whispering. A few reporters scribbled frantically, recognizing that this was the story. It's not the shouting. Then Jasmine finally spoke softly, evenly, every word deliberate. She dismantled Cheney's accusations with clarity, fact after fact, without a single crack in her composure. Each sentence landed like a hammer, not because it was shouted, but because it was undeniable. For the first time, Liz Cheney's rhythm faltered. Her interruptions grew clumsy, her tone lost its edge. The more Jasmine remained calm, the more Cheney appeared unhinged. The contrast was brutal, one woman screaming, the other steady as a mountain. One relying on volume, the other on truth. By the end, Jasmine didn't just win the exchange. She flipped the entire narrative. What had begun as Cheney's attack became her own unraveling, exposed not by countershouts but by the simple strength of restraint. The calm smile had destroyed more than arguments. It had destroyed the illusion of control Cheney thought she had. In politics, where fury often wins headlines, Jasmine proved something timeless. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the strongest. As the heated exchange came to an end, something remarkable began to unfold outside the walls of Congress. Reporters quickly picked up on the moment, replaying the clip of Liz Cheney's outburst in JasmineCrockett's.com, almost effortless. Smile that dismantled her arguments in real time. Within minutes, the video spread across social media platforms like wildfire. Twitter lit up with hashtags, hashtag.com, vs, chaos, hashtag Crockett destroys, and hashtag smile that wins. Commentators pointed out how Cheney's frustration stood in stark contrast to Crockett's poise, a dynamic that made viewers gravitate toward Crockett's side without her even raising her voice. On major news outlets, the clip became the headline story of the evening. Political analysts praised Crockett's composure, calling it a masterclass in restraint and intelligence. Talk shows debated whether this moment signaled a larger shift in how political debates would be judged, less by volume and more by the strength of calm confidence. Public opinion polls on social platforms leaned heavily in Crockett's favor. Memes, reaction videos, and editorial cartoons flooded timelines, portraying Cheney as flustered and defeated, while Crockett was celebrated as the embodiment of grace under pressure. By the next morning, the narrative was clear. Liz Cheney had raised her voice, but Jasmine Crockett had raised the bar.